Assalamu alaikum. Adwahe. Well, today is January 17, 2011. The Saida is visiting. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the interesting people that I have met in my life. Let us start with Pakistan. Let us start with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and how I met him and his family. I was a young boy in Ladkana with my father. My father, as I have mentioned before, was a very handsome, very prominent man, advocate, politician, very admired person in Ladkana. He used to have big kachari. A lot of people used to come see him. Early 50s, maybe I was 12, 13 years old. One of the people who used to come there regularly was a guy called Sikandar Bhutto. Sikandar Bhutto was one of the two sons of Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto. Sir Shah Nawaz had been a very famous man of his times, a favorite of British government. He had title of Sir, so he used to be called Sir Shah Nawaz Bhutto. He had been active in politics, and then he was defeated in elections, and then he moved away to Bombay. In Bombay, the British government gave him a good assignment as member of Public Service Commission. After Pakistan, he returned to Sindh and to Ladkana. I used to see him also at our house once in a while. People who came to see my father usually will get a cup of tea, or they would get what we call sharbat, sort of a sweet, non-alcoholic drink. But Sir Shah Nawaz used to like a bit of scotch, bit of whiskey. So my father used to give it to him in an opaque metal glass. While everybody will have a sharbat or tea, he would get his drink in a metal glass and he will sip it. Then one day we heard that his other son, who had been studying abroad in England and America, a guy by the name of Zulfikar Bhutto, had returned. And my father arranged a little lunch for Sir Shah Nawaz and his two sons, Sikandar and Zulfikar. I remember it was in a small dining room in our house, and there were, how many? 7 chairs in it. Sir Shah Nawaz had brought his two sons, Sikandar and Zulfikar. So father also made sure that his two sons, Ghulam Ali and myself, also sat at the lunch, even though we were much, much younger, and those two Bhuttos were much grown up, but there had to be parity. And also my uncle Nizamuddin Memon, who was of the age of Zulfikar Bhutto, he was also at the table. So my father, my uncle, two of us, Sir Shah Nawaz, Sikandar, and Zulfikar Bhutto Sahab, we were there. And I vividly remember that Sir Shah Nawaz took hand of my father, and then he, from another side, he took hand of his son, Zulfikar, and put hand of his son in hand of my father, and told Zulfikar that, look, Abdul Fattah Memon is like your elder brother and like your father, and you have to work with him, and you have to be always good to him. That was a very interesting lunch, and of course nobody knew about the part that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was going to play in history of Pakistan later. As we later found out, he became a member of President Ayub's cabinet, foreign minister, then president and prime minister of Pakistan. But let's come back a little bit. I remember few other meetings with Mr. Bhutto. The next meeting a gathering I remember, one of the first political assignments that Bhutto Sahab took was to be president of Ladkana District Zamindar Association. And he was to speak at a public meeting in Jinnah Bagh in Ladkana, a garden which used to be called at that time Tajar Bagh, Tajar Garden, and later was changed to Jinnah Garden. Anyway, Bhutto Sahab stood up to speak. And of course, he was not used to speaking, especially was not used to speaking in Sindhi. So he spoke very hesitant manner, half words of English and half words of Sindhi. But of course, nobody could guess that this man was going to be one of the great orators of Pakistan in years to come. Then I remember the revolution came in 1958, and Ayub Khan became Chief Martial Law Administrator, which was being like the president. And one of the first acts he did was to arrest Muhammad Ayub Khoro, who was a very prominent man from Sindh. He had been defense minister in previous government and had been boss of Ayub Khan. But Ayub Khan did not like him. So one of the first things he did, he had Ayub Khan arrested. He had Ayub Khoro arrested. Ayub Khoro had been a close friend of my father for several years. He was president of Sindh Muslim League, and my father was general secretary of Muslim League. So we knew him very well. And here was a day of his trial in Resident Magistrates Court in Karachi. Khoro Sahab was represented by A.K. Brohi, who was a very prominent attorney of his time. Now, my father had come from Ladkana. I was a first-year science student in DJ College. Now, it was a small courtroom, maybe a little bit bigger than this library. There were few chairs in it. In those days, government used to have chairs which were not as big as a chair where I'm sitting, little bit smaller, wooden chairs. And my father had a chair, I had a chair, we were sitting and listening. And then my father noticed that behind him stood near the door a young man who was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Zulfikar Bhutto did not have a chair. So my father motioned to him. Now we are talking about late 1958 or early 1959. So he kind of waved with his hand to Zulfikar Bhutto to come over. And since there was no chair, my father asked me to sort of move in my chair and make room for Zulfikar Bhutto Sahab. So Bhutto Sahab came and sat in the same chair as me, and we listened to the trial. Next time I remember meeting him was just a few days after this courtroom. And we went, I was back in Ladkana. Yes, within those next few days, Bhutto Sahab was picked as a Minister of Commerce in Ayub Khan's cabinet. So then Bhutto Sahab was coming to Ladkana, sort of his first big public party. So citizens of Pakistan, of Larkana, arranged a garden party in same Jinnah Bagh. There were tables and chairs in the garden, and mithai and samosas and tea and that sort of thing was served. And Bhutto Sahab got up, moved from table to table, and he came to our table also. My father introduced him to me, and Bhutto Sahab said, "Yes, I have already met Ali Nawaz." So that was the next time we met. Next time was again back in Karachi. In Karachi, in DJ College, we had a Sindhi student social circle, and we arranged a party for some fundraising and so on. We were looking for a chief guest. We thought of A.K. Brohi to be our chief guest. And one of my friends who was active, Nur Ahmad Shah, and myself, we went to see Brohi Sahab to invite him to come and be our chief guest. And Brohi Sahab was rather rude. He was not interested. And he more or less declined. Okay. Next, we thought of Bhutto Sahab. And we went and invited Bhutto Sahab. And he immediately agreed. And we asked him to come over at 3 o'clock. This was to be at a famous hotel in Karachi at that time, Excelsior Hotel on Elphinstone Street. There was a roof garden, and we had a party at the roof garden. In Pakistan, the custom is that when you invite somebody at 3 o'clock, especially a minister, you don't expect him to come until 4, 4:30, something like that. And actually, everybody is late. So myself, Nur Ahmad Shah, and few others were busy making sure that tables were set at the roof garden when somebody came running and said, "Bhutto Sahab is here." So we ran down, and it was sharp 3 o'clock, and Bhutto Sahab was there, and we brought him up. And even our principal, D'Souza, had not shown up. So he came and sat with us while everybody else started coming. And in fact, I have a picture from that party, which is just outside the room. So this was another time. Now, next time that I met Bhutto Sahab was where I needed a favor from him. Now, I was to come to United States, but I needed approval from State Bank of Pakistan to get foreign exchange permission so that my father could send me money, about $200 a month. Unfortunately, State Bank declined. So we decided to approach a couple of important people who might be able to help. And Bhutto Sahab was one of those. And I went to see Bhutto Sahab myself at his house in Clifton. And I went there. I used to be really skinny little boy, about 17, 18 years old. And I went there. There were a lot of people to see him. But he recognized me. He was very kind to me. And he said, "Ali Nawaz, what can I do?" And I explained to him. So he called his secretary. There used to be a CSP officer by name of Wahid Khan. And he said, "Wahid, get me Saeed Ahmad at the State Bank." Now, Saeed Ahmad was the man who could issue this permit. So Wahid dialed the number but did not get him. And Bhutto Sahab turned to me and he said, "Ali Nawaz, I'm sorry that Saeed is not there, but I promise you that I will make sure to talk to him. And I left. Of course, we had approached Said from some other people also, principally Mir Ghulam Ali Talpur. And 2-3 days later, when I went to State Bank, Saeed Ahmad was very courteous, and I got my foreign exchange, and I came to United States. And I have a feeling that Bhutto Sahab did call Saeed Ahmad, and Saeed Ahmad did oblige. It's interesting that almost 25 years later, I met the same Saeed Ahmad in Washington in a party. And at that time, I was a reasonably senior guy at the World Bank, and Saeed Ahmad he had just retired as Deputy Governor of the State Bank. So Saeed Ahmad was very happy to meet me. And then I reminded him how he had refused my foreign exchange request, and then later Bhutto Sahab and Mir Ghulam Ali Talpur approached him, and then he approved it. And we both had a laugh about that. Anyway, my next encounter with Mr. Bhutto was by phone in United States. I was at University of Illinois. We were arranging a Model United Nations conference at the university. And I was the head of Pakistan delegation, and we had made sure that Kashmir question will be debated. And I heard that Bhutto Sahab, who was foreign minister by that time, that he was visiting Washington. So from Champaign-Urbana, I phoned the embassy, and I managed to get Bhutto Sahab on the phone, and I invited him to come as our chief guest in Illinois. He said he was sorry, he was occupied, but he will make sure that someone from the embassy will come. And indeed, he did send number 2 at the embassy. But as it turned out, we managed to get Chaudhry Sir Zafrullah Khan, who was at that time President of United Nations General Assembly. We managed to get him to be our chief guest, and Bhutto Sahab's man from Washington also came, and we had a great 2-3 days together. Now, my next encounter with Bhutto Sahab was in 1967. By that time, Bhutto Sahab had been fired by Ayub Khan, and he was an opposition man, and he was traveling and campaigning vigorously against Ayub Khan. And I went to meet Bhutto Sahab with my friend Anwar Chatoi and his nephew Shoaib Chatoi. 3 of us went there. And here at Bhutto Sahab's bungalow at Clifton, he was sitting with another young friend of his, a guy called Munir Haisans Wala. And we sat down and we had a chat. And I had just come, I had finished my studies in the United States, and I came, and I had been appointed at the World Bank, but I had not joined the World Bank yet. And we just came for a courtesy call. Bhutto Sahab was very nice to me, and he looked at me, he said, "Where is your father?" I said, "He's here." He said, "Why doesn't he meet me?" And I said, "Well, he has the same complaint, that why don't you meet him?" And Bhutto Sahib smiled and he said, go tell your father that let us get together and let us form a new party and let us get this bastard out. And of course, he was referring to Ayub Khan as being the bastard. So he wanted me to go request my father to come and meet him. Now I went home and I sat with my father. Now, of course, my father in the meantime had been ambassador in Saudi Arabia, had gotten to know, he had worked closely with Bhutto Sahib, who had been foreign minister, and they knew each other very well. Now, my father had a ear problem, that his hearing was not that perfect. He had even gone to New York and had surgery on his ear, but unfortunately it had not worked well. And then in those days, sons like me did not just walk up to father and said, hey, this and that, and talk to them. No, I just went. My father was sitting and I pulled up a chair near him and very politely started to tell them that I went and met Bhutto Sahib, and Bhutto Sahib asked me to tell you this, and so on. My father was very quiet. He did not say anything. He did not comment at all. Now, knowing my father, this was a common practice. We sort of knew that many times if father did not like something, then he would not respond. He would just remain quiet. So I thought, well, he does not want to go and meet Bhutto and help him form a party. So I quietly went away, did not say anything. Again, many years passed, and by that time, Bhutto Sahib became president and prime minister, and there was coup d'etat, and he was sent to gallows, he was hanged, which was a great tragedy. And I was visiting Pakistan again, and again I was talking to my father, and I said to my father, do you remember that day so many years ago when I came and gave you a message of Bhutto Sahib, and he wanted you to come and join his party? This time my father was looking at me when we were talking. So he looked at me, he said, no, I don't remember. I said, well, I gave you the message from Bhutto Sahib. He wanted you to come and join him, help him form a party to throw out this bastard. And my father, with all his sincerity, said that he does not remember, that I never told him. And at that time, I realized that maybe I was sitting on the side of the ear from which my father did not hear well. So maybe he did not hear the whole conversation. And then we sort of talked about it and marveled at it. Because if indeed that was August 67 when this happened, and Bhutto Sahib formed Pakistan's People's Party several months later in November of 1967. So if my father had indeed met him and joined him, my father could have easily been the chief minister or governor of Sindh, and the history would have been different. But then, when Bhutto Sahib got hanged, maybe my father would have been in jail also. So here was some twist of history, something that did not happen. And who are we to tell as to what would have happened? if this thing had indeed happened. So this was a interesting encounter with Bhutto Sahib. Now let me tell you about my encounter with General Ayub Khan. And since Adi Saida is here, I'm going to talk to her and tell her this story of my meeting with Ayub Khan. You know, Ayub Khan was a very tall, very handsome man. He was also a very powerful man. He ruled Pakistan for more than 10 years. He was really all in all. And of course, most of his time from 60 onwards, I was not in Pakistan. So I never really had any chance of meeting him. And anyway, he was too big, too important to meet me anyway. But now we are in around 71, 72. By that time, I was already at the World Bank, and I was visiting Pakistan on some official business. So here I was in Islamabad. And at that time, there was no sort of decent hotel in Islamabad, so we used to stay at Intercontinental Hotel in Rawalpindi, and that's where I was staying. And one evening, a friend of mine, guy by the name of Slahi, who used to work, was manager of Investment Corporation of Pakistan. He later became president of the United Bank in Pakistan. Anyway, Slahi had phoned. He said, I'm coming over and I'm bringing another friend with me. Okay. They came to the hotel, and this young man, I'm forgetting his name, but he was also from United Nations system, and he was working in Pakistan as advisor to Balochistan government. And he came, and while we were having dinner or something, this guy asked me, do you want to meet Ayub Khan? I said, of course, I would love to meet Ayub Khan. And of course, Ayub Khan was not in power, because by that time, Bhutto Sahib was the president. And I said, of course, I would love to meet. How can I meet Ayub Khan? He said, you know, Ayub Khan is in Islamabad. He is staying at his house. And these days, he's not doing much. And if you phone him, then you can meet him. You can tell him who you are, and you can meet him. I said, but tomorrow afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock, I have to leave. I have to fly back to Washington. And he said, well, try anyway. So anyway, in the morning, I phoned Ayub Khan's house. And somebody picked up his secretary, and I told him my name, and I said, I'm visiting from Washington on World Bank business, and I will love to meet Ayub Khan, but I'm leaving today. So is it possible to meet him today? He said, well, I have to check with Ayub Khan, and I will call you. And soon he called me back, and he said that I can come about 11 o'clock or so. I said, well, I have meetings. I cannot tell whether I will be finished, but do you mind if I come later or so? He said, yes, come when you are ready. And fortunately, the meetings closed soon. So by 11 o'clock, I was free, and I showed up at Ayub Khan's house. And I was escorted to the drawing room, and Ayub Khan was sitting in a big chair like the one that I'm sitting on. So his secretary brought me, and Ayub Khan could barely sort of stand up like this. He stood up, and he gave his hand and his hand was like that of a dead man, and he just gave his hand, and we said, asked me to sit down, and we sat down, and then we started talking. We talked about so many things. We talked from 11 to about 2 o'clock. We talked about what happened in Ayub Khan's period. For example, one of the questions I asked him, I said, you were doing so well until 65 or so. Then there was war, and then your power started declining. What was the cause of your decline? And Ayub Khan gave to me a sort of strange answer. He said, Mr. Memon, he was calling me Mr. Memon. My goodness, here was General Ayub Khan. He was deputy god of his time, and he was addressing me as Mr. Memon. He said, Mr. Memon, I tried to introduce a new religion in Pakistan. This is why I lost my power. I said, new religion? What do you mean, new religion? He said, well, you see, what I mean is that I tried to introduce a new economic system, tried to industrialize Pakistan. People of Pakistan used to work on farms. They were farmers. I brought industrialization. Instead of working 2-3 hours a day on their lands, they had to work 8-9 hours in a factory and standing up. I introduced rough life, and I tried to make this nation, and people did not like that. I kept quiet, but it was interesting to note that this was the main reason that Ayub Khan as the reason for his decline. One of the questions I asked him, I said, General Saab, we all know that you do not like Bhutto Sahab. Tell me, what are options to Bhutto Sahab? If we could change the government again, what are the options? He again said, Memon Sahab, I don't see any option to Bhutto Sahab. I said, what do you mean you don't see any options? There is military. Military can come back. In those days, Wali Khan was a fairly important political leader. I said, Wali Khan can come in power. Maulvis, Jamaat Islami and so on, they could come in power. There are so many options. So what do you mean there is no option? He said, no, I'm not trying to hide anything from you. He said, let's go one by one. He said, army, now this is Ayub Khan talking. He said, army can never come to power in Pakistan again. I said, why not? He said, well, they have suffered such big defeat in Bangladesh. And he said, more than 90,000 soldiers and officers are trapped in India like rats. And these were the words he used. He said, they are trapped like rats in India. So he said, people of Pakistan will never accept army in power again. He said, now you are talking about Wali Khan? He said, I have not met Wali Khan in many years. I know him, but I have not met him in many years. But from what I know, Wali Khan had not come out of provincial shell. So what Ayub Khan was hinting at is that Wali Khan is a provincial leader, that he will never be able to be a national leader of Pakistan. He said the religious parties, Jamaat Islami and so on, people talk a lot about these people, But you know, in reality, if you look at election results, they have never gotten maybe more than 5 to 10% of votes in any elections. So people will not accept them as the national rulers of Pakistan. I said, then General Saab, what do we do? And you know, it was interesting what Ayub Khan said. He said, you know, every day I pray. And he pointed his finger to prayer rug, John Nawaz, which was there. He said, every day I pray here and I pray for long life and success of Zulfikar Bhutto. I don't like him, he said. I think he knows more how to destroy. He does not know how to build. But for us, Pakistan, there is no option. So I sit here and pray for him. One of the other things we talked about is why there are not so many Sindhis in army. And he gave his reasons why they are not there and so on. And then I said, well, if you created a Sindh regiment and started recruiting Sindhis and started training them, then we will have more Sindhis in army. He looked at me. He said, you know, up to now, nobody has recommended this to me. If somebody had recommended this to me when I was president, it's a good idea, I would have done it. I said, you mean to say that Bhutto Sahab never recommended that Sindh regiment should be created? He said, no, he did not recommend. And I met so many Sindhi politicians and so on, they never recommended. That was another very interesting point. We talked about so many things in 3 hours. Then it was, since my flight was at 4 or 5, I had to go. So I got up and I said, General Saab, I'm so sorry, I have to go, I have a flight to catch. And this time, Ayub Khan again stood up. But he stood up like a soldier. This time he was not like the mouse. This time he gave his hand to me like he was really happy and strong. He gave me a hand and he walked with me hand in hand. He came outside the house. My car was there. He opened the door of my car and I sat down. And I was really sorry that I had to go because obviously he was enjoying it and I was enjoying it, and I had learned so much from him about history of Pakistan, because we had talked about East Pakistan problems and other problems of Pakistan and military and so on. It was a wonderful thing. And my car drove away and I waved at him and he waved at me. This was one of the very interesting meetings.